All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for registering and joining for our Tuesday Talks Week 3 webinar. We love to see some familiar faces who've come here today. And thank you so much for anybody who's returning to one of our webinars. Thank you for the feedback that you gave us from last week's panel. Just some webinar etiquette before we get started. Please mute your audio and just note that we are recording the webinar. So if you aren't comfortable with your camera on, you're more than welcome to keep it off. But if you are comfortable with it, you are welcome to keep your camera on. We'd love to see your faces, and you are more than welcome to use the attendee backgrounds that we've provided for you if you like. In regards to the Q&A, any urgent questions can be put into our chat box, and both panelists and Leap Execs will try our best to answer your questions. Otherwise, you can save your questions to the end when we have a designated Q&A section. And yeah, thank you so much. All right, so we do want to say a big thank you to one of our sponsors for Tuesday Talks, Pearson Canada. Thank you so much for sponsoring our Tuesday Talks series. They've got a lot of useful digital study tools and resources that you can use during your first and second year. So make sure you follow them on Instagram or Facebook to get their study advice, university and college tips from other students. You can join their student community and even textbook giveaways. I've personally used some of their resources when I was studying for some standardized tests. So if you're interested in that, make sure you check them out. All right, so our agenda today will be starting off with an overview of LEAP and some of our summer programs, and then we'll get into our productivity, time management, and habits panelists. We'll have our panel discussion, and we'll wrap up our first section with a Q&A period. So an overview about LEAP, we are a Canadian registered nonprofit and student-run organization since 2020, and our goals are to bridge the gap between high school and post-secondary education while helping you leap into your future. We've impacted 10,000 plus students across 35 plus countries through 8 different initiatives. And if you would like to learn more about our offerings and how to further get involved, you can visit www.leapcanada.org. If you would like to gain some valuable skills and learn some more about the industries that you're interested in, you can check out our Pathfinder program at leapcanada.org/pathfinder. It will be happening next month. And one last thing, by attending this webinar, you are automatically entered into our Brownie Points giveaway. You can win points by coming to more webinars, asking questions, and filling out our feedback form. We've got $400 worth of prizes to be won, so come out to as many webinars as you can and ask all the questions that you have, because who knows, it might just win you some prizes. All right, so we'll get into our panelist intros right now. Justin, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So, hi everybody. My name is Justin. I'm going to my 3rd year at Western. I'm studying kin with a honors special in clinical kin. Hi. So, some stuff I've done since I've started university basically is that I'm currently an intern at LifeMark Health Group Physio Clinic. And I'm also the social media coordinator at Leap Canada. Yeah, best team out there for sure. Also, I'm currently the Facebook manager at Kaiser Fashion Show. It's a fashion club at Western. I love clothes, so yeah. And then also lastly, I also am a communications associate for the Faculty of Health Sciences Student Council, also at Western. And yeah, fun fact about me is I love dogs. So if anyone likes dogs, you can send me some questions about that. So
Awesome, thanks, Justin. Next, Guggen.
Hi everyone, I'm Guggen. I'll be entering my 4th year at McMaster in the Life Sciences program. So some of the things that I've been involved in since being a university student. So I'm co-president for International Women in Science Day at McMaster. So that's a club that advocates for female identifying students and professionals in STEM fields. I'm also a practicum student at the Canadian Public Health Association. So I'm currently looking at social determinants of health and how they've influenced people's lives during the pandemic. So I'm currently looking at that. And just this past May, I entered the Ontario Science Case Competition and I won with my partner. And yeah, I really love science and I'm really glad to be here.
Awesome, thanks. Minachi.
Hello, everyone. I'm Minachi. I'm currently in McMaster University in my 2nd year, specializing in biochemistry. I guess some things about me is that I was a research assistant at Princess Margaret Hospital for my co-op, highly recommend. I volunteered at Key Club where we helped fundraise using a variety of events at our school. And I've learned Indian classical music for about 10 years.
Awesome, thank you. And Michelle.
Hey everyone, it's nice to meet you. I'm Michelle, and just a few things about me on the slide. So during the year, I was an intern at a startup called Diversio, which is essentially a people intelligence platform that helps measure, track, and improve diversity and inclusion of different companies. In school, I'm an analyst on the Queen's University Investment Council. So we're a student-run fund that manages around $2 million. I'm also a competitor on the Queen's Case Competition Union, which is our official case competition team, and we represent Queen's University. I'm competing internationally. And just for a little fun fact about myself, I recently got into Formula One and really big fan of Lando. So if any of you watch Formula One too, I'm super happy to talk about it. But that's it for me, and excited to be here on the panel.
Awesome, thanks everyone. All right, so into our panel discussion, we've broken it up into 4 parts. We'll start off with studying in online school, procrastination and motivation, staying productive, and finally time management. All right, so getting started with studying in online school, what are some tips for studying on a computer? Justin, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, so for me personally, I just started studying off the computer when I joined university. And one thing for me that's really been helpful is using Microsoft OneNote for note taking. For people that don't know what that is, it's kind of like a program that is like kind of sets all your notes and all your courses into like one organized like platform. So like you can separate by classes, and then you can go into like, oh, I want to go from this class in 2 weeks, and then even move further into like each lecture for that week, if that makes sense. So I found that super helpful. So because I don't really like having like everything all in one document. I just like scroll for like 100 pages. But yeah, so I use that. And also, Google Calendar is a good way for me to kind of organize my time when studying on a computer, because I'm really distracted. I get distracted a lot. So definitely Google Calendar, I get to break up all my studying on my computer and all stuff like that. And lastly, I think a lot of people do know this, but I do use the Pomodoro technique to study on a computer. So basically, I study for 25 minutes and then take a 5-minute break, just so my brain doesn't get completely fried from studying for like a couple hours. And yeah, one thing is I will review lectures before and after class. So since the computer has all my notes on it, I'll write out my lectures, review it before class, so just so I have an idea what's going to be talked about for that class. So yeah.
Awesome, thanks Justin. Gagan.
Yeah, so I have some similar points to Justin, but some different. So before lecture, what the professors usually do is that they'll post the lecture notes on their website. I download those notes and put them on OneNote. So that way during the lecture, when the lecture is taking place, I just take the notes along the corresponding slide. And before I actually go to lecture, I'll just read over each slide and highlight where I think I'll have questions, or if a concept is maybe a little difficult to understand, I'll like maybe prepare questions beforehand that I would like to ask the professor afterwards, if they're not answered during the lecture. Usually after the lecture, my questions do get answered. And then, yeah, after I highlight where I think I'm going to need a little bit of extra help, I'll ask the prof or consult the textbook. And after the lecture, I would just review everything all together. So all the reading that I did beforehand and all the notes that I took on OneNote. But yeah, OneNote is definitely a very effective note-taking app. As Justin said, you can make the notebooks and have that sorted out into like your lecture notes or tutorial notes. So yeah, that's what I use too. And those are some of my study methods that I have been consulting when studying on a computer.
Awesome, thanks guys. What are some micro or atomic habits you've implemented in your online school routine? Justin.
All right, yeah. So sorry, I see some of your questions, but I'll just answer it like once I finish talking. So I mean, so starting off, yeah, so micro habits. I started scheduling my day in advance just so I kind of have a game plan of what I'm going to be doing the next day. So usually when I finish studying, I'll take like maybe 10 minutes just to go on Google Calendar and kind of plan out my day. Also look through OneNote to see what I could study the next day or what I could do better and all that. Also, I've started taking a lot of walks after long study times. So because I personally don't like sitting in a chair for too long because my body starts to ache a lot. So yeah, I do take a lot of walks, not for too long, maybe like 15 minutes, and then I'll come back. And yeah, usually I always tried to be a workout guy at night, but then recently I found doing that I didn't have enough time to do some studying that I wanted to do. So now I kind of started waking up a lot earlier, and I'll work out at like around 7:30 in the morning, just so I have the rest of the day to do whatever I want. So yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Justin. Guggen.
Yeah, so micro habits for me. So at the start of each week, I like to set goals for myself. So if I know I'm going to have like a test the week after, I want to set a goal like, okay, this week I'm going to study all these different chapters, and if I have like other assignments or other extracurricular things, I set those goals at the beginning of the week. So when I do plan my days out beforehand, I kind of have like a more clear picture of how I want to set up my day. So yeah, setting up your day beforehand, I think is definitely very effective, especially in this like online setting where time just like melds together. You should like plan out your day beforehand. I think that's a very effective strategy, and goal setting as well is important. And similar to what Justin said, taking breaks after long study periods is very effective. If you just kind of like study for like 4 or 5 hours without getting up, you're probably not going to retain the information that you're studying anyway. So taking the 15-30-minute walk, maybe taking an hour break is really effective between study periods, especially during like long hours that you'll be sitting for. So it's important to stay refreshed while you're studying. So taking those breaks is especially important.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. And how do you balance academics with social life during online school? Justin.
Yeah, so for this, I always like to kind of space out my studying. So for me, I don't like to really cram. So what I do is I kind of start maybe a week or even something a week and a half early. And then I would only study like each kind of section of the course that I need to study for like maybe like 2-3 hours. And then I would do that every day leading up to my exam. So then kind of after those 2-3 hours in the day, I could have other time to do like kind of talk to my friends, hang out, like go to dinner, stuff like that. Because sometimes when you're cramming a lot and you feel like you don't have enough time, and you just study for the whole day, and then you don't have any time to kind of balance your social life. And yeah, that's pretty much what I do. So
awesome. Guggen.
Yeah, so for myself, a piece of advice that I'd like to share is to set realistic goals for yourself to maximize productivity. So what I mean by like set realistic goals, like an important part of setting these realistic goals is kind of reflecting on yourself and knowing what your ability is. So for example, if you set unrealistic goals that are not attainable, you're probably going to end up feeling bad that you're not being as productive. But the thing is, you are being productive, but your goal might be unattainable. So you feel like you're being not very productive. So kind of just reflecting on what your ability is and setting realistic goals for yourself will help you be productive and feel good that you're doing an efficient amount of work. And when you're doing that, you'll see that you have extra time to spare to like hang out with your friends, talk with your family, play video games, whatever you like to do. So it's important to recognize what your ability is and set goals pertaining to that.
Awesome. Thank you both. All right, so moving on to procrastination and motivation. How do you avoid procrastination with schoolwork? Minachi.
I personally prefer dividing my day into time slots. For example, you might do like 9 to 10, like chemistry, 10 to 11, biology, 11 to 12, lunch, so on and so forth. Um, but I consider this as more hard deadlines in order to avoid like slacking off. So especially with longer assignments, so such as like an essay, I would usually be like, okay, I'll plan for like 2 days. First paragraph, first day, second paragraph, second day. And by holding these a lot as hard deadlines, it prevents you from actually like pushing it till the very end and then just being overwhelmed with all this amount of work.
Awesome. Thank you. Michelle.
Yep, this is a great question because I think it's something I definitely struggled with throughout high school. But I think what I found is that the hardest part is just really starting. It's getting your laptop out, opening a document, and actually doing the work. But I think it's important to change your mindset on, I guess, why it's important to start earlier. And that's just because we have such busy lives and we want to socialize with our friends and family. We have other tasks as well. And the thing is, I found that every time I procrastinate on my schoolwork, and like left everything to the last day, something always had to happen the last day. And then all of a sudden I was just in a pretty big like nightmare and I had to complete my task and then also deal with the other emergency. And that's just something that you don't want to experience a lot of the time. So I'd say like there are many great strategies that were mentioned before that you can do, but really just starting as soon as possible is just such a simple thing, but I think which is the most important thing as well. And something else I'd like to point out here is I always think about procrastination as an opportunity cost. So you think of it like procrastination is the cost. The cost of it is the life that you could have lived or the fun that you could have had if you didn't do it. So I'd say it's important to try to just start as early as possible, and then hopefully the rest can follow through with that.
Thanks. All right. So how do you power through a long day? Minachi.
I personally like to power through a long day by ensuring that I actually give myself enough breaks. Obviously, this will depend per person. I personally can mostly focus very well for an hour, and then I might need like a 5 to 10 minute break in between. Some people can stay longer for like 4 hours, but definitely not me. And I think something with burnout is especially when you get stuck on something. For example, if you're doing like work and then you're just really stuck on that one question that you have no idea how to go forward. I think switching things can help your brain like not get bored. That way, like you feel like you're not wasting any time because you're at least moving with something new and fresh. So you're not just overwhelmed and stuck with like the one thing that's dragging you down.
Awesome. Thank you. Michelle.
Yeah, also a great question. So for me, I would say power naps. And I know it's really interesting. There kind of is a stigma behind napping and sleeping throughout the day. But I'd say this is probably the best way to actually make sure you don't burn out. And I'll kind of speak to a few reasons why. So I know a lot of people do drink coffee or use sheer willpower, but I feel like they're very effective, but it could actually lower your quality of life and your quality of work. For example, like coffee may make you very jittery, or if you use like sheer willpower, your work quality may go down. And power naps are pretty great just because I only sleep for like around 20 minutes. So I think you really don't waste that much time. It's equivalent to, let's say, you scroll on Instagram for 20 minutes. It's the same amount of time, and it also actually really energizes you. And some tips I'll give you guys is to make sure you sleep at kind of at a time that you wouldn't actually be sleeping at. So don't have your power nap at, let's say, midnight. Otherwise, you probably won't even wake up from it since you're so used to sleeping anyways. So schedule it maybe, let's say, around the afternoon. I'd say a lot of people power nap after school or after their jobs. And something else to do is just try to keep it at 20 minutes sharp, or depending on your sleep schedule or your sleep cycle, just because you don't want to enter the deep sleep phase, or else when you wake up, you'll be very groggy and even more sleepier than before. But other than that, I think that's something that's pretty important to me. So I power nap a lot, and I think it really helps. And some other just really small tips is just to make sure you catch up on your hobbies, make time for exercise, reading, journaling, and hydrating yourself. And all these small things will really help you get through that very long day.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Those are some really great tips. All right. So moving on to staying productive. How do you stay focused for long periods of time? Justin.
All right. So for me, just to stay focused, I mainly, yeah. So like I said before, I use the Pomodoro method. But what I find during my breaks is that going on my phone for like that 5 minutes really makes me even more tired because especially when you're studying on a computer, like your eyes are always looking at the screen, and then when you go to your phone for that break, like you're still looking at your screen, right? So for me, I guess being really tired. So like really what I do is I I would like stretch in my room, not looking at my phone. I would like talk to my family or my roommates, stuff like that, just for that extra 5 minutes, and then right away go back, just so that I don't get too burnt out after a long period of time.
Awesome. Thanks. Guggen.
Yeah, so for myself to stay focused, what I'll do is I'll limit distractions before I start studying. So my phone is probably like the biggest distraction. So yeah, if I have to study, I'll just put it in another room. My computer has like everything I need to Google search or whatever it is. So my phone is really unnecessary when it comes to studying. So I'll just leave that in another room or put it in a cupboard or somewhere. So I'll limit distractions in my workspace. And then in terms of like staying focused and actually studying for that long period of time, I found what works for me is studying in 1.5 hour intervals and then taking like 20, 30 minutes in between. Everyone's focus is different. I just found that 1.5 hours works for me. And yeah, that's just like my main focus interval. I can't do any like longer than that without taking a break. So yeah, my advice for the students listening is to just like recognize a period of time where you can like effectively power through a study session. It's different for everyone. So yeah, you just have to recognize what works for you.
Awesome. Thank you both. What resources do you use to maximize productivity? Justin.
Okay, yeah. So like I said before, I use Google Calendar. Google Calendar is a great way to kind of organize your time to kind of just, maximize your productivity as best as possible. And also what I've started kind of to use more is an online web page blocker called Freedom. It's basically a web page blocker that you can turn on when you have your study periods, and then it kind of blocks out any irrelevant websites, so like YouTube, Netflix, Instagram, Facebook, all like that. Like I said, I get really distracted, so I kind of need that extra secondary kind of web page thing to kind of set me back into place of study mode and not go scroll on YouTube and Instagram for like an hour. So yeah, I use that. And then also what I've just started to use as well is I have a whiteboard in my room that kind of motivates me to be productive as possible, which is what I read is what you put into it is what you put out of it, because I know what I put into it right at that moment is going to ultimately help me succeed and ace that final, ace that exam in the end. So yeah, that's what I do to maximize productivity.
Awesome. Guggen.
Yeah, so for myself, I also use Google Calendar. So at the beginning of the semester, I'll make sure my Google Calendar reflects all the scheduled classes that I have. And then I'll also insert my meeting times throughout the week, as well as like volunteer work hours. I'll put that all in my Google Calendar, and I kind of just like run by that to stay organized throughout my week. And then, as I said before, I kind of set goals for myself at the beginning of the week, and I plan my days out beforehand. So for that, I use my Notes app on my MacBook. So I just create a to-do list for like every day, like, okay, read this chapter, go to this meeting, whatever it is. So I'll use my Notes app to keep track of my progress and to make sure I actually like achieve my goal. So these are a few of the things that I do to maximize my productivity and to stay organized throughout the week.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. How do you schedule your day to study productively? Justin.
Yeah, okay. So like Guggen said, how I schedule my day to study productively is I find my most productive time where I feel that my brain is functioning at the highest level. So it's different for everybody, but for me, that's in the afternoon. And how I would schedule is that Depending what courses I have, I'll put the course that requires more brain power, more kind of concept understanding and all that. I'll put that in the afternoon for me, because I know that's going to take a lot of work to understand, and my brain has to function really high for those classes. So like, for example, like biology, stuff like that, or chemistry, I'll put that during that time. But then there's also classes that are just like pure memorization, and they don't really require you to kind of memorize, to kind of understand a lot of concepts. So those will kind of fall into either my morning study period or my night, and stuff like that. And then of course, like the classes that require more content, I'll definitely put more hours into it. So I'll have a longer study block for those, comparing to other classes that don't have too much to study for. So yeah, and I also fit in a workout as well. So the workout for me kind of helps me stay productive. I usually put that really early in the morning, just to have like a good start to my day.
Awesome, thank you. Gagan.
Yeah, so for myself, I recognize that my peak productivity hours, specifically to like studying, would be during the afternoon or early evening. So in the morning, what I would do is like write emails or work on like a few extracurricular projects. And then when it gets into my like productivity hours, that's when I would actually do my schoolwork. And when I scheduled that block where I'm actually going to be like studying, I don't like do anything else, like reply to emails or like text friends or anything like that. Like I've reserved time for myself to like look over my notes and actually study. So I use the 1.5 hour interval, 20-minute break in between during the early afternoon to the evening. So yeah, that's what I do during the midday. And then after I'm done all my work, it's usually like nighttime. Then I have time to actually spend time with my family or hang out with friends. So this is like my ideal productivity or productive schedule. Obviously, there are some disruptions throughout the day. So don't feel discouraged if like your original day plan is a little altered. It's totally okay. But it's good to make sure that you keep yourself like in check and you're staying like focused throughout the day when you kind of like schedule these hours that you're studying. So yeah, that's how I schedule my day.
Awesome, thanks guys. And moving into time management, what tools or resources do you use to manage your time? Minachi.
I like for online resources, I like using the reminders and calendar app on my phone, especially with keeping track of my schedule. I think some schools may allow you to transfer your schedule onto Google Calendar, which should allow you to keep it on your Apple Calendar if you have your account logged in. So that I use that for like my classes and to just roughly organize like my day to day. And especially reminders is very useful for stuff like midterms and exams and other tests to keep track of, because you're actually able to like tick them off as you go through your year. But I also like to keep like a printed calendar, or at least like have it online on like a touchscreen device like an iPad. That way I can at least it allows me to kind of see it from an outside perspective, like a larger perspective, like the whole week. I like using that especially during like midterm, like exam season, because then you have like a bunch of stuff all at once and you can actually visualize your week as a whole. So I think using like a combination of that would actually help you like plan like your overall like month or week and like the nitty gritty like day-to-day stuff.
Awesome, thanks. Michelle.
Yeah, very similar to all of the resources mentioned in this webinar, but I personally use the calendar app on iOS and Outlook. And so I think the really great part of these two, I guess, platforms is that if you have multiple emails, so let's say you use like a Gmail for personal, maybe a school email, a club email, and then all these different emails have these calls and meetings. You can use either the Apple Calendar or Outlook, and I think Google Calendar as well, to sync everything together. And so that way you're really on top of all the meetings, which I think is quite important, especially in this virtual environment. And then just outside of that, I just pretty much use a pencil and paper. And as seen on the slide, I divide my tasks into days, weeks, and months. And so it's pretty simple, to be honest. But I think that like when you have your tasks, for me at least, when I write things down tangibly, it kind of like makes an imprint in like my brain almost. And so it makes me remember it a little bit more strongly than if I were to type it down. And I think also the ability to like cross out your tasks when you're finished is quite satisfying and also really helps out a lot. So I'd say like that's pretty that's the system I use. I actually used to use Notion, and I know Notion's like this new platform. It's pretty cool, almost like Excel, but you can personalize it a lot. I'd say that's a great platform too if you want to check it out. But I think overall, what's really important is that you use what you think is best for yourself and not what other people have been using. And just try to also make it as simple as possible, because especially as you enter university, things do get quite busy. And if you have many systems, it's going to be very difficult to keep track of. And so hopefully that helps everyone out. But I'd say using some sort of platform to make sure you have everything in one place is very, very helpful.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. All right. So could you guys briefly touch on some tips that you could give on how to prioritize the important tasks? Minachi.
I like to just go based off of due dates and weights. So anything that's due earlier and weighs the most will be done first, whereas anything that's due less and weighs less would be done later. And if you have anything that's due on the same day, go based off of what takes the least amount of time and is like maybe due earlier. Also, like alternate tasks as soon as you're stuck. That way you're able to be more productive and not like spending a lot of time on like one little task, anything like that.
Awesome. Michelle.
Yep. And I'd say the point above is so, so important, especially as, again, when you head into university, you're just going to be overloaded with so much tasks. And so with me, it's really just simplicity. And I think prioritizing perhaps 3 important tasks for the day, that's really all you need. And you'll find that anymore, you might not be completing them all to the degree that you or the level of quality that you want to. So I think keeping it simple is really great. And also just blocking out all distractions. And I feel like we all think we're good at it, but then you'll find yourself back on TikTok or something. So when I say this, I mean like literally like deleting all the apps off of your phone, hiding your phone so it's not in the same room. And sometimes if you really need to, it even means like locking yourself in your own room. You'll see that in university, like even for myself, I'll be working, my roommates will come in and drag me out to go. So in that case, I'll have to literally block out all distractions and just like not let them enter my room. Seems very silly, but really small distractions can add up. And so again, simplicity, just having 3 to 5 really, really important tasks, and then blocking out distractions is what I'd say is will help you prioritize tasks.
Awesome. Thank you both. How do I handle ECs and academics simultaneously? Minachi.
I like to keep my schedule pretty consistent so you can actually understand like the flow of things and kind of get used to it. And plan tasks around things that you can't move. So if you have like clubs meetings at certain times, obviously you can't move them. So plan your other workloads around them. One of my profs actually suggested to consider school like a full-time job, so 40 hours a week, where you have like work in the morning, and then that way you can actually enjoy during like the afternoon and the weekends. And I think that's a pretty good way to keep things like all together.
Awesome. Michelle.
Yep. This is a great question. And I have a few things to say. And the first thing I want to say is, I think when you're approaching your life with so many different things going on, try to have like 2 big pictures in your mind. Like the first one is like all the events, calls, and meetings that you have going on. And then the second is the tangible work that you have to get done. So let's say you need to write a paper, complete a PowerPoint, etc. So that way, going into the day, you know what you have to attend, but you also know what you have to complete. Something else I think that's quite important that's on this slide is to not overload your ECs. In high school, I've seen and I used to be one of those students who wanted like a certain number of ECs on my resume or a certain type of ECs. And then eventually you'll see everyone just does quite a bit of them, which is honestly amazing. But I think when you especially start to apply to university and when you are university students, you'll start to realize that it's so important to have quality ECs over quantity of ECs. And you'll see that even when you're applying to university, they don't really care about how many you have. They care about the stories you have and the experiences. So by understanding this and not having an overload of extracurriculars, you'll be able to also balance your academics a lot more easily at the same time. And the last point is just like when you take courses at school or you're choosing what to get involved with, just do what you love, because if you like truly love what you're doing, then it won't feel like work. It'll just feel like a lifestyle, and you'll like love to do, even if you're very busy, you're going to love to do your schoolwork and your involvements, and it won't feel like busy at all. And so that's something that's very important. And I think as a high school student, like when I was in high school, I didn't follow that as well. So I found it more difficult to actually manage my time. But if you try to incorporate this into your attitude and the way you approach things, it'll be a lot more easier.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. All right, so that takes us to our Q&A period. You are more than welcome to put some questions in the chat, and we'll try our best to answer as many as we can. And yeah, so I'll just go through some of the questions that we see. I see a question that asks, how many hours on average do you study on a weekday and on the weekend?
Yeah, I can take that question. I don't mind. So it depends like what part of the semester you're in. So, but generally, during like a regular week in a semester, I'd probably study like 4 to 5 hours a day. And then on a weekend, probably the same amount, honestly, for me. It just depends like what type of classes that you have. So if you have like a heavier class, you would probably study more hours during the day. But, and it also depends like how many classes you actually have during the day. So when you become a more senior student, you'll see that you have like more time during your classes. So you might spend some time studying during your breaks. And usually for me, like 4 to 5 hours a day during the weekday when I have like a bunch of meetings and classes, that's how much time I put into studying.
Awesome. There's another question. How would you recommend setting up your course schedule, for example, class times or days of the week?
Yeah, I can take that one. So, I mean, it really all depends like on like yourself, right? So I know personally, like for me, I like always setting my class schedule all in the morning. So I like having all my classes in the morning, just so when I'm done everything, I have the rest of the day to kind of do whatever I want. But I mean, also like I know some people that like to have like classes kind of spaced out throughout the day. So they have like kind of like 2-hour breaks in between each class where they can do work. So I mean, it really all depends like kind of where you think you're kind of the most productive at, and then you kind of just set up from there. And like, of course, like, you know, sometimes like, you know, course selection is not always like you won't get the stuff that you want sometimes, like you might not get the time that you want or whatever. But I mean, it also like you kind of just have to like kind of figure out how to like kind of compromise with like stuff you don't get and whatever. So I mean, yeah, I'll just say kind of find your time that's you're most productive at and kind of see what you kind of like, and then try to schedule it from there. So
awesome. Here's another question. How did your productivity habits change, if any ways, from high school to university?
I can quickly take this one. I found that honestly in high school and university, I both had the same goal of trying to be productive. The difference was in high school, I imagined myself being productive, but sometimes it didn't happen just because in high school, there's a lot of leeway to be unproductive, and it's okay because you have so much more free time. But in university, like you're really forced to be productive. Like you have to put it into practice just because like if you don't, you will literally drown from the amount of work you have. So I'd say for me, simply, I've always had the same idea of the habits I wanted, but in university, I was quite forced to actually implement it and to perhaps narrow down on the habits that I had before and only utilize like the most effective. And it's really hard to identify these best practices because they really do change per person. And so I guess just a little bit of a follow-up or an addition for advice, like don't be afraid of trying different things during university because you kind of have to go through that trial and error process and to figure out what best works for you.
Awesome, thanks. There's another question. Is there something specific that you wish someone told you before beginning first year?
Yeah, I don't mind taking this question. One thing that I really wish someone told me in first year, I wish someone emphasized the importance of being like well rested before you go to class. So from high school to university, I thought like, studying up to like 1, 2 in the morning would mean that like I'm studying hard and I'll get good grades, but really it just like messes up your sleep schedule. So when you go into lecture the next day, you're not well rested and you're not retaining any of the information from lecture. And you're, when you are well rested, you're looking back at your notes and like nothing makes sense. So make sure that you sleep well. It sounds like really simple and it might sound like I'm not giving good advice, but this is like one thing that I regret not doing in first year. So make sure like you take care of yourself, take care of your body, because healthy body equals healthy mind, and you'll like retain information from lectures. So like sleep well, guys.
Awesome, thanks. Do you have any practical tips for prioritizing coursework when you don't feel like studying?
I can take this question, I guess. When you really don't feel like studying, I think taking any small tasks is like the easiest, or maybe doing any prep work for the next day would be easier. So for example, if you want to study for like a midterm, but you don't feel like studying at that moment, maybe making a few flashcards that day that you can just casually do, which doesn't take as much effort as you're just writing down your own notes. Or maybe just setting up whatever you need for a class prior can just save you time, and like future you would probably thank you for that, as it just takes some of the weight off of the next day.
Awesome, thank you. What are some ways to take care of yourself on a busy day?
I can take this one. It honestly depends on person to person and what you think works best for you in terms of self-care. But I can list what works best for me, and then can see if it helps you in any ways too. But I think for me, getting a lot of sleep, if it helps. I know in high school, and I'm sure all of you are very hardworking students, so you won't get enough sleep, but you'll start to realize that after a certain amount of time, you need a certain number of hours or a threshold of sleep to actually, be able to properly function. And so try to hit that threshold at least. Honestly, just eating healthy and drinking a lot of water is so important, and it's very overrated. In university, you kind of envision that typical student of eating ramen noodles like every single day. And I will say that happens because I witnessed my housemates doing it, but you have a very, like, it's your own choice to like buy like proper groceries and cook for yourself, maintain your diet, or buy ramen, which my housemates do. So I'd say like that's something that's very easy to help take care of yourself. Something else I recently discovered is if you're a really big overthinker and you want to just like take care of yourself, the best thing you can do is honestly just like write everything out. So journaling was really helpful. And if you're like underthinking, the opposite to that is just to like read a lot to fill your like your, I guess, your mind with other types of thoughts. And lastly, just a very again overrated thing is just exercise. I think a lot of people, if you're not a regular athlete, you kind of skip out on exercise just because you're like, oh well, it's like it's painful, it takes up a lot of time, and like you maybe don't have for your own fitness goal set up. But I think like exercise really helps you focus on something and just focus on yourself becoming stronger. And I think this really helps you mentally and physically as well. So again, there's lots of different ways you can take care of yourself, even if you're very like stressed out. But if you can fit these very small tasks into your day, like you'll be much more productive like as a result as well. So hopefully you can figure it out. But these are just some of the things that I do.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. And thank you to everybody who submitted questions. I do apologize if we haven't been able to answer some of your questions. Hopefully some of our future webinars or our part 2 will be able to answer those questions that you have. And not to worry, all of the questions submitted up until now will be counted for brownie points.